Hello, my name is Craig Otto. I'm a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. Thanks for joining me today. Today we're going to talk about project management and some of the problem-solving methods. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here you can see the different problem-solving methods. I listed out 5 of them. There's many more than that, but I figured I'd just do a high-level summary so you can kind of see the main point I want to make is that Plan, Do, Check, Act is kind of the foundation of all of these different problem-solving methods. It doesn't always work exactly perfect, but I at least wanted to show you how that works. So the first part is plan. And so let's go ahead and take a look at that. I've highlighted all the planning activities in blue. So for Six Sigma, that is your define phase. Usually DMAIC is the approach for Six Sigma, and we'll see that here shortly. Even something as a tool like 6S, I know SORT is actually part of doing, but part of SORT is analyzing kind of how far away your tools are, your materials are, what kind of motion do you have within your process, right? So you have to plan out where do you want all of your things and what things can you get rid of, what things can you bring closer, farther away, depending on how much you use it. It's all based on the frequency of use. And so that's still kind of a planning activity. The Blitz, usually I use this for quality, problem-solving, corrective actions. Blitz can also be a quick go in, just do it, before and after type of situation. And so we'll have like an initial picture, if you will, or initial state. And that's what I laid out in blue there, kind of listing out what the problem is, listing out what the current condition is. And then on the next one with Lean, you can see there's 5 different, and this is using the A3 method, there's 5 different, I call them boxes, that we use to plan. You want to look at the issues to be addressed, the current state, the future state where you want to go, the gap analysis, which looks at the difference between those, and then the improvement approach you want to take with that. Those are all a part of the planning step. Now we're going to go back to PDCA and look at the doing step. So for do, you can see in Six Sigma, a lot of times you're dealing with a lot of data, so you're going out, getting information, taking measurements, that's kind of the do piece of it. Now you're going to see more doing here later on once you get into the improved step. For 6S, again, you're going to do the sort, but also your straightening, your shining. Those are the activities that are actually doing the improvements. You could also throw safety in there. I left it out for now. On the Blitz, this is kind of your improved state, right? So the initial part of the Blitz, you have the initial condition, the problem, and then you show the solution. Maybe you airproof something, right? You have the do improved step. And then from an A3 perspective, from the Lean perspective, that's where you're doing the rapid experiments. That's where you're taking your actions and incorporating those and making changes. Now we're going to do the check phase. In Six Sigma, that's kind of like the analyze phase, where you're trying to find root cause to the issue that you're trying to resolve. In 6S, that's kind of your standardize phase, where you're making sure you're checking the first 3 S's to ensure that you're reducing waste and doing those every day. And the Blitz, that's where you kind of confirm the savings of your before and after, that root cause. By taking that away, what kind of savings do you have? That's your check step. And then, of course, with the A3 and the Lean side, that's where you have your confirmed improvements, where you actually confirm the changes that you made and how they've made the process better. And then the last step is your act, and that is in Six Sigma where you do the improve. In 6S, that's where you sustain, and in the Blitz, that's where you show your next steps. And of course, on the A3, that's your lessons learned of what you're going to do in the future. And then there's kind of a last step. It's kind of implied with Plan, Do, Check, Act, but you continue doing the process, right? You repeat that PDCA. In Six Sigma, that's kind of the control phase to ensure you kept the improvement. And on the Blitz, you can see the follow-up is the sort of repeat phase. Okay, so seeing that there, you can tell that all of these different methods have the foundation of Plan, Do, Check, Act. And so what I'd like to do next is just talk a little bit about the application of these. Okay, so here we can see the table and when to use the different tools. You can see the tools on the left side, as well as the application, what types of data, and the type of waste. So first we'll talk a little bit about Six Sigma. That's particularly very useful when you're trying to reduce variation. It's when you have large amounts of volume for products and services. It's when you have a lot of data that it becomes very powerful. And particularly, it's trying to address the waste of Mira, which gets into the inconsistency of processes or unevenness, and trying to reduce that variation. The Quality Blitz, and that is root cause corrective action. It's also used for general types of lean, just do it projects, things like that. It's good for problem solving. It's good for flow stoppers and showing kind of how you did a before and after type of condition. Usually in terms of data, really what you're trying to do is demonstrate cause and effect. And so a lot of times pictures are actually more useful than this. And data can be valuable here too, but a lot of times, like I said, you'll use pictures more than anything. And again, this is to address the waste of overburden, unreasonableness. Those defects cause a lot of issues in the process, so we're trying to remove that type of waste. All right, so let's jump to 6S. This again is very applicable for trying to reduce motion and reducing space. And typically what that does is it helps reduce your hours per unit or your time on each task by eliminating distance. Distance can be physical, but it can also be mental as well. So visual management can also be a part of reducing waste, which we've identified as MUDA. And then of course lean itself, which is the bigger picture beyond 6S. That's the systemic waste reduction using all different types of tools, standard work, pull systems, one-piece flow, and so forth. And really what you're trying to do there is make sure your resources are operating the most effectively as they can, and as well as keeping your inventory low to reduce that waste. So that's when you use those different types of tools to really improve your process and make a difference. Now I'd like to talk about project management and specifically documentation and savings. I've mentioned A4 a few times in my training videos. Here you can see just the general outline of what an A4 looks like. You have the red initial state box, you have the green improved, that's meant to be a before and after type of report, and then you have next steps and follow-up as well as savings. Typically these are not meant to be difficult. We use these a lot of times on team meetings and team projects. As mentioned earlier, they're good with just do it type of activities. And so I like to use them where people can see applicability beyond just work. This is an example of my patio. I have an initial state here. You can see I took a picture. There's some mold growing between my bricks, and it's just very dirty. And in this area, we weren't able to really utilize it because of the moss and dirt, and so we like to have a place to sit outside and relax, right? But you can't do it if it's messy. And so you can see in the improved state, right, was able to clean it, sprayed the patio with weed killer and swept up all the dirt and power washed it and sprayed it down to this clean state, right? And so now it's cleaner. You can see before and after, it's visible, and that tells a story that speaks to you. Next steps kind of gets into where do you go next. You can see for my example, the blocks need to be sealed. So we'll have to get the blocks sealed, and then the patio furniture can be moved in place, and then visitors can bring chairs and have a great place to sit and relax. And in terms of follow-up, kind of 3 different steps here of when I want the activities to happen, right? Cleaning the bricks is complete. I want to seal the bricks by July 27th. Put the furniture in by August 3rd, and have a cookout by August 10th, right? That's just an example of sort of a little mini action plan that you use to follow up on to make sure that the improvement, keeps going. And then savings-wise, in this example, I just said 20 square feet of savings, right? $100 of cost avoidance of having to go out and purchase other things that would maybe try to make a different area work. By getting it cleaned up, we was able to utilize the space, and so it's savings. These types of A4s don't require a significant amount of leg work on the savings. I think if you just give a general idea, maybe an hour per unit saved, or a certain amount of floor space saved, or just a real quick down and dirty, a quick savings of what the benefit was of doing the initial to the improved state. Keep it simple. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about reporting out. This particular example is going to be an A3. I talked about an A4 last time. A4 just is the European style of paper, so it's 8.5 by 11 inches is an A4, and typically I kind of put it on its side. The A3 is an 11 by 17 sheet of paper. Again, A3 is the European standard size for 11 by 17. And so the idea is you lay it on its side, and you have 9 boxes that tell a story. And this story talks about all the improvements that were made in a certain event. And I know on the A4 I said you can keep things kind of general, especially for the savings. Now on the A3 you're going to have a lot more detail, and typically I like to have a lot of pictures and data and really help tell the story of the issue or the process that you're trying to improve. So with that, we can go ahead and get into it. The first box is on the top left. It's called issues to be addressed. And you can see in this example, I put, there's no 6S in the area, there's no standard work, there's no pull systems, we're doing batch building. And these are, the things that we want to address. I have a little metrics chart there that shows that it's not good, right? Have a little do not enter type of sign. So those are things that you want to address. And typically the other thing is, this is usually where you use your charter. You may put a lot of your charter, your project charter in this box, just because your charter identifies the scope and all the different things that you want to address and deliverables that you have to meet. All right, so let's jump to box 2, which is right directly below issues to be addressed. It's called current state. In the current state, you'll typically have a few metrics that you're going to display. And ideally, especially if you're doing lean implementation, you'll have what's called a bar chart. A bar chart is a part of standard work, the lean tool standard work. And here you can see operator 2 is over their attack time. Their red bar is the time that they have to do work. You can see that their operator 2 is over, and you can see operators 3, 4, and 5 are under. And so there's some imbalance going on there. And the next box is the future state. This is where we want to get to. You can see the metrics. You want to have those same metrics that were in current state, kind of showing what they need to do to improve. And then again, with the bar chart, here you want to show, and again, you may not know how to do this yet, but you can at least show the concept of you want to be able to balance that work out, leaving operator 5 open for redeployment, meaning we free them up and we use them for continuous improvement activities because we made the process more productive. The next box is at the top in the middle. It's called gap analysis. This is where we compare the current and future state. And what we're trying to do is figure out what is causing us to not be able to achieve the future. And so a lot of times you'll use a cause and effect diagram. You can see my little fishbone there with the man, material, machine, method, measure, and environment. And then you do a 5 why analysis to select your root cause to some of maybe the problem that you're dealing with. The other thing is if you're implementing more lean versus, I'll say, a 6 Sigma type or problem solving, if you're focused on lean where you're focused on eliminating waste, you'll use a spaghetti diagram in this box. The next box is the improvement approach, which is directly below gap analysis. Typically here you're trying to identify which lean tools you're going to be using. You can see I listed the 4 core tools there with 6S, one-piece flow, standard work, and pull systems. I also did a little ideal state value stream map, kind of showing what the perfect process would be, kind of that what good looks like. And then the next one is where we get into the do part of things. This is where we take our rapid experiments. And you can see I just kind of listed out, we did a 6S value stream, we trialed standard work, we introduced the Kanban and pool system to the operators, and we trialed one-piece flow. I have a little picture there of people. That's meant to be the picture of your team. I always like taking pictures of the team so you can remember who was a part of the event. Those are always fun looking at 10 years later too. So that's everything that happens with your rapid experiments. And then, of course, for the action items, you want to capture everything that you completed, everything that's in process, and everything that needs to be done. And that's the red, the green, yellow, and red there. Green are things that are done, yellow are things in process, and red are the things that need to be done yet. The next box, box 8, which is confirmed improvements, that's usually done after the event, maybe 3 to 4 weeks after. Sometimes you do 30, 60, 90-day follow-ups to get the confirmed improvements, but that's where you capture your soft savings, hard savings, your metrics, metric changes, and so forth. And then last but not least is your lessons learned and insights. This is where you get the team together and capture all the different things that the team learned for the week or for the project. Collaboration was key. Using the tools reduced waste, and distance reduces motion, and one-piece flow is the most effective, right? All these little insights so that when another team comes up, they can learn real quickly from what you've done, especially if they're trying to implement standard work like this was done in this event on this A3. All right, so the last item I want to talk about is calculating savings. Calculating savings kind of breaks into soft savings and hard savings. I know I get a lot of questions on this, whether something's soft or hard savings, so I'll try to answer those questions as best as I can going through examples here. For soft savings, many times you go out, you make a change, and you'll do a time study, and the time will show that it's better. I realize that seems like it's hard savings, but honestly, it's better to actually use true performance measures over a period of a quarter instead of time studies, because time studies don't take into consideration all the different variations that happen in the process, whereas actual results will. But nonetheless, they are still soft savings, so you should capture them. Throughput. If you're putting through more throughput, that's obviously a good thing. You can capture that by schedule metrics or different things like that. Depending on cash flow and different things, there might be some opportunity for hard savings there if you have performance-based payments or those types of things. But for the most part, with throughput, you're just estimating the value of that. Rework, defect reduction, rework reduction, error reduction. Those are typically soft savings until you can tie them back to, like I said, hours per unit or true financial measures to the bottom line. Risk mitigation, again, hard to quantify as hard savings, but it is important. Employee retention, that's another tough one to kind of quantify, but it is super important. You want to keep your employees, because every employee you lose, you got to hire someone back. There's training costs. There's loss of experience and knowledge, and so it's super important. Space savings or space utilization. This is actually one that can go both ways, both soft and hard savings. If it's soft savings, typically that means that your business is not completely filled up. In other words, you have floor space that's not utilized. Also, if you own the space that you're using, it may not be very beneficial if you free up a little bit of space. I'll talk a little bit more about when it's hard savings. There's specific situations there. But in general, if you're cleaning an area up and you just freed up some space, if you don't utilize it for something else, then that space will get used by something else in the future, but you don't know what. So that's why it's soft savings. All right, so lead time would be another one. Again, this is one that it's hard to really quantify. Obviously, your customers can get the product sooner, so that's a good thing. Can you put a dollar value to that? It gets a little bit more difficult. It's not necessarily hard savings. And of course, all of this is kind of cost avoidance and really capacity, kind of unlocking that capacity is really what soft savings is about. All right, now we're going to jump over to the hard savings side. So for hard savings, that's where you get into actual hours per unit saved. In other words, you look at financial data where you have maybe department performance over a period of a year. You compare the last quarter to the previous 3 quarters, and if the hours per unit is less, you know that that's hard savings to the bottom line. That's the best method for me in terms of time savings versus things like time studies and so forth. The headcount reduction, obviously that'll be shown from HPUs as well. But yes, if you pull someone out of the process and you're able to do that process with less people, that is hard savings. And then any overtime reduction, this is more so getting into the fact that you're going to pay time and a half for someone to do a job. If you can work that area into a place where they're not having to utilize overtime, That, of course, is cost reduction. It's hard savings. Any time where you don't have to buy materials or supplies, or maybe you find a deal where you're able to get a better product for cheaper, that would be hard savings, right? Because that goes to the bottom line. Kind of the same thing I'll talk about in a minute with equipment and things like that with equipment. Kind of the same type of thing. But before I get to that, we'll do inventory reduction. This is obvious for cash flow. If you don't have as much inventory, that means you're able to utilize that cash. And that's a hard savings. Space utilization, I spoke about that just a little bit ago. So if your building is completely utilized and you're able to save space to put a new program in there or a new process, that is hard savings. If your building is leased and you're able to free up a part of that building that you don't have to lease anymore, that is hard savings. So that's any specific examples on how to get hard savings from space. And then this is what I mentioned about the materials up above, getting into equipment and maintenance where you're having to buy replacement parts. If you can improve the overall equipment effectiveness to where it's not breaking down as much, you don't have to have as many replacement parts on hand, that is all hard savings. And of course, shipping and logistics. If you're able to package something in a better way, drive down the shipping costs, of course, that's hard savings. Energy savings, utilizing different lighting, looking at utilizing different maybe tax incentives from the government to improve the energy of your buildings. Those are all examples of hard savings. If you avoid maybe a capital expenditure by putting together a better process, creativity before capital, that would be hard savings. And then, of course, any warranty or returns that you're able to reduce, that's a hard savings in the shipping costs and the cost to do the support of those, investigation, and so forth. All right, and that is everything that I wanted to share. Hopefully you've been able to get a good feel for project management and the different applications, as well as how to report those. I gave two examples, the A4 and then the A3. And then I also went through kind of how to calculate or what different methods you can use to get hard and soft savings based on the projects that you do. Hopefully you found that beneficial. Be sure to like the video and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.